And we are live. Chris and I were just talking about our morning. And anyway, so Chris, what's up? What were you going to say before I hit broadcast?
It was just the whole, God, I've already lost it. We're talking about how to push through your day, getting a brand new modem. Oh, here's the thing I was going to say. It's funny because I think you and I have talked about this before, and I know I use it when I use the podcast to, work through stories of people that I've never met before, except through my digital PLN or maybe at a conference somewhere. So there's always that tract of time on the front end where you're just kind of like shooting the breeze, right? Just kind of, and it could be anything. It's funny. There's never been one conversation the same in that first anywhere from 15, sometimes it's like 45 minutes. You just kind of start chatting. And usually at some point, if you're getting up around the 30-minute mark, I'm starting to think, geez, I wish I'd hit record sooner. Or just said, let's go to tape, because there's good stuff that comes out. And then you end up saying, just before we started talking or hit record, you try and do that footnote to a previous conversation. So what I was going to say to you, I am more than cool with, because you tend to be the one setting up the links. As soon as I pop up on the screen, I'm okay with a brand new behavior norm. Hit record, right? And it's funny because those minutes are useful. I think our attack on this is to get to the convo faster. I feel as if I'm kind of experimenting in my own world about getting to the work in the moment when it appears, so I have less homework. Really, it's funny, and I'm starting to think about the homework that happens before the task too. I don't know. That's a whole other episode. And it just occurred to me. But, there's tons of chatter on right now there's a few people popping off on the Twitter sphere talking about homework and the new form of homework and should we do homework. Is setup homework? For me, it kind of feels like it with the podcast, right? Setup is homework. So I am more than cool for you to hit record as soon as you see, my scruff pop up on the screen. Just do it. Let's go right to the conversation. Because that's what we would do if we phoned each other, right? It's not like we don't have a pretext conversation. Okay, do you want to have a conversation? Yeah, that would be good. Well, when would you like to have a conversation? Well, I don't know. Let's text back in 1 minute and have a conversation. It's like, hello, jump into the combo. Boom. Hit record when you see me.
Okay, interesting. However, when you call somebody, it's not going live to everybody else to be able to hear. So maybe if it were, then maybe there would be some type of protocol like, hey, okay, is there anything you need to say before we hit record? Oh, uh-huh. Okay, let's do it. You know what I mean? I have a feeling that the next time we get together, that when I hit record right away, you're not going to get some of what I might say to you off air. And that's just being honest. You're just not. So let's see how that works out.
Okay. So how about this then?
You're going to come on and I'm going to hit record. And you're going to be like, hey, man, my kids were da-da-da-da-da. And I'm going to be like, right on, Chris. What do you want to talk about this week?
Okay, how about this then? Let's try make it tight then. Just make it tight so we can get to the record. I don't know what that is. I don't want to say 5 minutes. It's almost like, let's just manage it or let's roll the dice and see how it goes. Because everything in between feels like we're not in the driver's seat. You know what I mean?
I know. I don't mind giving a shot. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Okay. No, okay. That's totally true. And the fact of it is, and here's the thing, let's do a little decoded on doing podcasting. Quite often when you have that conversation on the front end, there's a little bit of decompression that sometimes has to happen. Like, I do get it. You got to get a little bit of your day out. Oh, there could be a little bit of swearing. There could be a little bit of just not the stuff that, I don't know, like you're getting the muscles warmed up for the conversation, active stretching, right? So, and then by the time you get that conversation, not only do you have rapport, sometimes it just kind of gets the energy to the space that you feel like you can get to the stories. So
for sure. When I've talked to people on my podcast, sometimes I had never met them before, most of the time. So those couple of minutes before we hit record, just say, hey, how's it going? How was your day? Thanks very much for agreeing to talk to me on the podcast. It was like just a bit of a prep, just to kind of get the bugs out. Then when you hit record, you've already established a little bit of that rapport But I hear what you're saying. You and I, we already have a rapport. So it would be neat to just get right into it. Now, what's really cool about this episode is that you and I are doing it a little bit later than usual. So has that kind of thrown off your morning so far?
No, you know what? I kind of liked it. It's weird. I kind of liked it. Conversation comes first. I think the hope is that we can find a spot. The hope is just that we find the sweet spot where both you and I can get together. So conversation, you and me hanging out, the core. Where we go with that, you know, we throw those tags back and forth during the week to say, you know, what do you want to talk about? Or just an observation of our context. Here's this thing that's happening, and let's, you know, we're kind of baiting the hook for the conversation on the weekend. This morning, and before we went to tape, we were talking about the time we get up in the morning and all that kind of stuff. Like, I can't help but get up early. And I don't know, I've spent a lifetime telling myself I'd like to be the guy that could sleep in. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. For better, for worse, when I've tried to sleep in, either A, I don't sleep in, I just kind of still wake up slightly early, or I kind of blow past sort of a time that I think, like, I could have done something with those, whether it's get the dog out for a walk or go grocery shopping, which is what happened today. I wasn't sure how this was going to play out exactly. The day, like you, is kind of busy around here. So I knew I had some time before our 9:30 meet time. So the kids this morning, they got up. Spouse is still sleeping. She had mentioned, you know, wants to get a little bit of a sleep in. I'm like, cool, whatever. So that works for me. So at about 8:05, the kids wake up. I'm already into the day. Dishes are done. I got laundry rolled and all that kind of stuff. And they come downstairs. I'm like, okay, dudes, you got 15 minutes to get dressed, have your breakfast, because we're leaving. We're doing groceries. Because I'm looking at that hour pocket of time between 8:30 and 9:30, and I'm telling myself I can get groceries done. I can get groceries done in an hour. Now, one of the cool things about groceries that's changed is it's turned into a collaborative effort. I send my son to the deli. I send him into the bakery. My daughter gets her own little cart, and she goes long game, Hail Mary. She's across the supermarket getting milk, getting yogurt, getting cheese. Now, apart from the whole, this is just good knowledge for a kid to have. It's funny the looks, eh? Because when I'm in the veggie section, I can see my son at the deli section, and he's like, the dude is like, he's short, like he's half the height of the deli counter, you know, those big display deli counters. And I can hear him from across the grocery store. Hello, hello, hello. And he's jumping up and down so the person behind the counter can. Now it's better now, but it was funny at a time when there'd be like 8 or 9 grown-ups standing there. And they're not even saying, hey, there's like a little dude down here that needs deli. They're just kind of watching him jump around like a maniac. But now he does it. He'll step right up, 300 grams sliced roast turkey or whatever, because he's the one that kind of eats the deli meat. He likes having the sandwiches. So I task him. So rewind that back. 8:15. I'm like, get your breakfast done, get dressed, and be quiet upstairs because mom wants to chill a little bit. And we get out of the house 8:30. We're done grocery shopping by 9. Just because I like hunter-gatherers send my children into the store like little minions. And we're back home here by 9:15. And I just needed that extra minute for my coffee. It was a selfish minute. I took a selfish minute in that 60. I said, I need a coffee before I sit down and I chat. But we got it tight. We got it done. I even got the stuff away. I got bread out on the counter, but everything is put away. So I appreciate it, man. Because you know what? Here's the gift. Dude, here's the gift. There are things that I have in my life, and I've talked about this before. I mean, it's that lost 7 hours mantra. But there's things in my life where I observe a need and I instantaneously say, I can't do it. I can't slot it in there. But I don't really have the evidence to prove that I can't, other than the magnetism of something else I would rather do. Check my Twitter feed, do some writing, have a coffee. So I proved this morning that I could do a full week's worth of groceries with my children in 36 minutes. That's magic for me. That really is magic for me. Because now my kids are playing, my spouse is still having her sleep in, and I got to my thing with you. That is magic for me. So I appreciated that switch up a little bit.
Well, I'm glad I could help. It was just one of those things where yesterday, I have a bit of a cold, so I'm coughing like crazy. Yeah, and I'm not doing anything to help myself either. Like, I'm still pushing myself. I'm not getting any more sleep than I normally get. Still exercising, which is funny because as I'm ready to keel over and die during my workouts, I've got this like recipe in my brain of the different TED Talks and stuff. I've gathered all the necessary information I need to convince my brain that I need to continue moving on. So you'll have to excuse me every now and again. I might have to mute the mic, give myself a big cough. But so the weekend's approaching. You and I usually connect, talk about what is it that we want to hit up this weekend. So I know it's a busy weekend. Friday night hockey, Saturday morning hockey, Sunday morning hockey. 2 kids. So I'm like, okay, how's this going to work? So I text you and I tell you. Now, I forgot about one of the hockey times on Saturday. So Friday night's good to go. My wife and I, we take the boys out for dinner. We come home, put the kids to bed. Oh, sorry. No, rewind. That's what normally happens. We went out for dinner. Then we had hockey. Then we came home, put the kids to bed. We watched the Tragically Hip movie, whatever you want to call it. We watched that, hit the sack. Normally, I'd wake up on Saturday morning and you and I would podcast, but one of the boys had hockey at 8. The other boy had hockey at 11. So Saturday morning was a complete write-off. Don't remember what happened Saturday. Oh, and then yesterday, my wife and I had some stuff to do. We went out at night together. So Saturday was just done. And then Sunday morning, early hockey practice. And then after this, my father-in-law is coming over. We're doing some house repair stuff. Only God knows how long that'll take. And then this afternoon, my wife has to work on her report cards and other like work stuff. So like she's got to go do something. So that means that I gotta have to like make sure the kids are good, and then do whatever I need to do. So it's just crazy, right? So I say to you, okay, let's make this happen between or after hockey and before I do housework. And thankfully you said yes, because had you said no, then I think, I don't know what, maybe like tomorrow or something, tomorrow night. I don't know. Anyway, long story short, we made it work, which is kind of sweet that we've been able to do it 8 weeks in a row. It's, I'm kind of enjoying it because it's a nice way to either start the day or it's a nice way to kind of reflect during the day on whatever you and I end up talking about. So I'm glad you could make it work. I'm feeling the burn from like my list of things that need to get done. This is the chat with you it's necessary in terms of providing me with like the time to reflect and the time to plan action moves, but it's a selfish hour, right? Like this is for me, this is not benefiting anybody else. So that's the tough part because there's stuff going on downstairs that I'm not part of. Anyway, so I'm glad it's working out. I'm really happy we've been able to connect 8 straight weeks in a row. Like that's a long time if you stop and think about it. So it's cool. I look forward to continuing and seeing what we can do. The hockey schedule isn't always going to be this crazy, but there are some weekends where it's just nonstop, go, go, go. And it's fun in that it's fun to see that my kids do something productive, hang out with other kids, be part of some kind of instruction that's different than the traditional school type activities. And it's fun for me to get to hang out with kids and not be the teacher I am during the work week. It's more of like, this is what we're doing here. This is how we're doing it. Let's have fun doing it. It's kind of different for me, right? It's like dad mode teaching rather than pedagogical classroom teacher teaching. So that's cool too. I see you nodding, like you agree, you want to say something.
Yeah, it's one of the conversations that's floating around the household right now, and it's incredible how it kind of extends out of last week or the week before when you and I were talking about that intentional interruption, and in just doing things that break up your thinking into sort of manageable parts. I mean, it's so easy to get into stream of consciousness type of existence where things are on automatic. You've got everything uber scheduled, and the bells rule your day, and then the family rules the night, which is fine. It's absolutely fine. I think somewhere in there, though, putting in a couple little sticks of dynamite just to kind of shake up just the top layer just a little bit to see, can things be done differently? How can we sort of approach our week differently? And I am the type to seek out problems. And this is something that talking about character type difference, again, my spouse and I were talking about this. So in her world, we're both problem solvers, but we approach them very differently. I go looking for a fight, and then she is entirely prepared to deal with the fight that comes to her. So when the problems are brought to her, that's when she goes into fixing mode. I kind of am a little bit of a seeker, as in I'm going to try and experiment and kind of just play for the sake of play. And we came out of that conversation just talking about right now she's involved in some community theater. It's just wrapping up at the end of next week, all done. And her intent in getting involved in this was to give her a little bit of a reminder of what it's like to have art in your life. Now, she's a drama teacher, but she wanted to reconnect with her past. So in university, that being part of her qualification, part of her passion, part of her before she was a teacher. A little bit like where you're saying going into dad mode, but let's say it's that selfish minute, like where you're taking stuff for you to remind you that you're sort of alive and doing things, and that you can be creative, you can do stuff too. So the conversation sort of turned towards a little bit of the necessity of having this side hustle. And I know you and I have talked about that before too, the side hustle that kind of is yours. And I said to her flat out, I said, I kind of like I'm not seeing the show that she's in until closing night. I said, I kind of like it that I'm only coming in right at the end, because it allows you to fully exist in it. It is entirely yours. And I'm like, what a wonderful big space for you to kind of exist in, of creativity, connecting with new people, having other new people sort of reach out to you about something that maybe they didn't even know was of interest to you. And I said, I'm happy. I'm entirely happy for you to have this like a hobby, like a side hustle. I think it's really important because it's part of the whole you. So when I listened to you talk about, being active with your kids and then connected with your spouse and then back at the landing, back at home again, I mean, it mirrors, that kind of flow mirrors my life to a T. And yet when in that whole flow, and I appreciate it, I still like to kind of shake it up a little bit. I like to put in those little small things. I like to see, could we try something a little bit different this time around? And it's a little bit of my wrecker brain, but it's pretty remarkable how often I find new spaces inside of closed thought. And me standing with my spouse, Karen, when I'm standing with Karen and I'm telling her flat out, I fully support you and your interest in arts if this is something you want to continue doing, and to see the happiness that statement alone creates for her, to support her in something like that as well. I have no doubt it's something similar to when our children see us involved and realize the things that they're doing, we're watching them create. We're not necessarily telling them what to do, but we're watching them exist in this really personal kind of activity. I watch my son and my daughter do their art, and I just watch. Don't got to say anything. If they happen to look up at me, maybe I'll sort of smile, but I'll just keep watching what they're doing. And it's really cool to watch people honoring the activities that are kind of a part of their, I'll say a part of their soul, a part of their creative center. So.
Yeah, I had a feeling. Well, not a feeling. I kind of know you're busy, and it was really neat yesterday seeing your Instagram account. I saw a picture of your son doing his art.
Mm-hmm.
It was really cool because you were like, I don't know how many meters back, but he was literally sitting at a table working. He was doing his thing, and I could imagine that you were sitting, wherever you were taking the picture from, you were sitting and doing your thing, but observing him as well. And I thought that was really cool. Some of the best times are when you're just observing your child doing what they're doing. Like yesterday, I hate to use hockey, but that's kind of what's happening in my life right now. But I'm on the bench and my son's out there on his shift, and it's just fun to watch him play. Like, just I was just watching the team and watching him, and it's really cool to see them do their thing, their craft, their creative, whatever it is, but just to watch them. Because a lot of the time, I don't know about you, but a lot of the time when I'm hanging out with them, I'm talking to them, or I'm doing something myself while they're doing something, I'm not really watching them. And so it's kind of cool to be aware and to watch, to observe, and to see what they're doing and how they deal with struggle and how they deal with success, all on their own in their own little world. It's refreshing in a way. At times it's frustrating because we might see them struggling, and you can see the confidence drop as they struggle, and you want to jump in, but sometimes not to, just to let it happen, and they'll bring it to you or they won't bring it to you. But yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing information about like your world, right? Because you do have a partner and you do have children, and then you have your own side hustle, your own pet projects, personal projects, right? So I like that. I want to, if it's okay with you, I want to kind of shift gears. I want to ask you a quick selfish question before we dive into some education stuff. This is kind of related, but I emailed you a link to a video about a guy talking about the Matrix and how to. Did you happen to see it at all, or is it just kind of sitting there waiting for time?
No, I watched it.
And
Yeah, I
did
watched
you?
it.
So I saw a video. Okay, so there's this guy named Tom Bilyeu or Bilu. I'm not sure how you pronounce the last name, but you can Google it, or I will probably add it somewhere in the comments on the blog post for this podcast. And Tom, I didn't know who Tom was. See, a lot of the time, one of the things that's really amazing for me about YouTube is that when I discover something on YouTube, I suck from it what I need. And then when I have a little bit of time, I revisit what I watched to get the backstory on the person who created it. So this guy, Tom Bilyeu, that's what I'm going to just say from now on. Tom Bilyeu, I didn't know who he was, but he's got this YouTube channel, this thing called Impact Theory. And basically he interviews people that he believes are like influential and have something to offer in terms of like mindset and stuff like that. And so that's how I discovered like David Goggins, and I think it's Mel Robinson. Anyway, so I've been watching a lot of the work he does with people, but then I started getting engaged in who is this guy? Like, who is this guy that created this thing called Impact Theory? What's his story? What's his deal? And then I slowly started to see some things that he's done on his own, and I've learned a little bit about him. So he's like an entrepreneur in the area of nutrition and supplements, I guess, from what I can gather. And he did this talk about getting out of the matrix. So he refers to the movie The Matrix, and he talks about our brains being the matrix that we live in, and how if you don't step away from what you're always thinking and why you're thinking it, then you are right in the middle of the matrix. You're sucked right into it. And if you want to get out of it, there are some things you can do. And when I watched it, there were so many things within his talk that resonated with me, not only just as a human, but as an educator. And it was so neat. Well, obviously it was good enough for me to pass on to you and say, hey, if you have a minute or 20, you should check this out because this might resonate with you. And I've been finding lately, and I think I said this when we were at the regional exchanges for the EdCan network. One of the things I brought to the table was that we need to look at the disciplines around us, and we need to take from those disciplines the things that are valuable there. I don't want to use the word best practice, but the things that are happening there and how we can apply those things to the world of education. And here we have this guy talking about your brain being the matrix and how to get out of it if you so choose. And I connected that to the work I do with my students. Every single one of my students comes to me with their own matrix. They've got their own bad habits with respect to their thinking patterns and stuff. And I say bad because I'm finding that a lot of kids I work with don't have like the positive wiring. And I think it's because of just the way society works in general. Like, think about this for a second. We spend a lot of time teaching kids about growth mindset, about being able to say, I can't do this yet. But they don't come to us like that. Like, I rarely, I'm thinking right now, I'm processing, and I can't, it's rare for me to have kids walk in the room with that mindset already that, oh, if I put my mind to it, I'll be able to do it. They come with, oh, I tried that, I couldn't do it, I'm going to move on to something else. And there's something to be said. There's some value in that approach as well. But I think that approach is valuable only in certain situations when, like, for example, if I tell you today I want to become a doctor, a medical doctor, well, there's 100 barriers in my way that I need to consider. I mean, I'm sure I could become a doctor, but I'm going to need time, money to get into medical school, to dedicate my life to that. And I don't think the 3 people that are in my family, in my life every day, I don't think they're just going to give me carte blanche and say, go nuts and go be a doctor and we'll see you in 15 years when you're done. So anyway, I wanted to make the connection that sometimes we need to look around at what's happening in the world around us and take what we can from those areas, those disciplines, and they can help us innovate within education, right? It's not like what people are doing in business and the real world, engineering and stuff like that, computer science. What they're doing might not be innovative in their world, but when you take them and you put them in a whole new world, a whole new context, it can allow people to think differently and to think in ways that maybe they could become more effective or efficient in whatever it is that they're doing. So anyway, I thought I'd throw that out there and see what you have to say about that perspective.
No, I like it. So much of that. There's so many little bits in there that I want to jump on. What was profound to me about that particular talk that he gave was when he talked about the allies in his life, which he kind of focused in on his mom, only in so much as that was sort of a starting point, her expectations of him, and that despite, so the story that he tells, and I've shared the link out on Twitter, so if people want to check out the video, it really was, it was slightly bruising to me to listen to the way that he spoke of his mom's double-edged support, as in somehow feeling that you're going to get bounced from the nest, you need to go make your way in the world, and then at some point finding out that there's the expectation that you are going to hit the ground pretty hard. Not that you're going to fly, but you're going to hit the ground hard, and you're going to come back, and you're going to come back to the starting point, maybe come back to the beginning, maybe come back and have to do it all over. And the dude talks about like discovering that moment in his life. Not the moment where his mom didn't necessarily believe that he was going to be successful, but where he was in that space where he recognized that he had to change in order to be successful. And I would agree that sometimes the language that I find myself using, and I talked about this before when I said I felt like the language of mindfulness and pedagogy are kind of opposed in some ways, that the experience of moving through a mindfulness activity is structured, can be structured in such a way that it really does, it's kind of beguiling. And as soon as you try to make it a lesson on mindfulness, I've started to wonder or just question, is that actually mindfulness? Are we allowing entry into the experience in a way that somebody is gaining the best of that moment? And sometimes the language of education does that. It's slightly resistant to seeing the reality in which it exists, because education wants to create the acronyms. It wants to create common tongue amongst educators. It's bound by government rules and regulations. There's communities around it that need to understand it. So that kind of uniformity, I think it's not naturally entropic. Like, it's not designed to break down. We're trying to design it so it's closed and it keeps on going and going and going. And what I loved, the second part that I loved about what he was suggesting, is that really recognizing the reality that you exist in. And if we do that in education, then I think we do have to open up the windows a little bit, you know, and let the other industries and other communities speak to us, really, really speak to us. Now, this is an accidental, well, sorry, seems like an accidental find that just happens to harmonize with my philosophy. I get what this guy's saying. I totally get what this guy's saying about how we put impediments in front of us. I get so much about what he was saying about his own awakening into his future. And, you know, even you saying about wondering what your family's response would be to you becoming a doctor. Well, I guess the other video you shared, you looked at this week, the Gary V link, where he was talking about, and it's funny, it was almost like the two links speak to one another, right? For different reasons. But that idea of, if you think that you're going into a job right now, whatever job you think you want to go into right now, I mean, we talk about this in high school. Is it going to be there? We're not going to disagree that becoming whatever you assume, whatever you want to become when you're older, whatever that is that actually the job, one, that'll be there? Two, will that job in the job market be super saturated, as in it's no longer the job to start at? And I always add a third thing to that moment, and I'll never forget talking to a student about him saying he wanted to be in the fashion business. And so this was during a careers class. He wanted to be in the fashion business. And right in talking to him, like, what are you sort of interested in? He really loved baseball caps, just loved the whole sort of upscaling them, styling them up, you know, sports, like all different kinds of things. But he loved even the design, everything about it. He loved baseball caps. So I said to him flat out, I said, do you feel like you have to go to university or college in order to start being involved in this business? And he didn't have a way to talk. He didn't have the words to exist in this conversation, because he was convinced that he could only start doing fashion once he finished college. So I thought, okay, I'm going to push through this. I said, why wouldn't you just start? There's students in this school that are taking a fashion course. You could go buy a bulk grouping of hats and you could start selling them on Kijiji right now if you wanted. And even with that pitch, he still said, no, I should get my degree first. And I just thought, oh. So examining what the reality is and what's right in front of you, I loved that's what the, what do we agree his name was? Bilibia? I'm totally dropping it. I'm like, he's
Billy
Yu. Okay. So
Billy Yu,
yeah. Yeah. It's the one thing that was a burr to me in that video. It was at the end, and I was conflicted, and I wondered if he would ever address it, is when he mentioned the amount of money and the success of his company. And it was meteoric. Like, the company that he started, it shot through the roof. It's doing very well, at least at the time of the capture of this video. And the whole group started kind of hooting and hollering and clapping. And I wondered was there anything in him where he wanted to ask, what is it that you're clapping for? Because that was like the message that was ringing out in his talk. As in the audience, what is it that you're clapping for? Are you clapping for my success? Are you acknowledging that this is a standard type of success? Are you somehow feeling like you're connected to my success by, throwing me high fives? And I just, I loved the resources that you shared with me. I really do. They get me thinking during the week.
Well, I'm glad they can be of some benefit, because there's always that risk that you're going to check it out and you're going to be like, wow, what an epic waste of time that was. That doesn't do anything for me. Doesn't meet any of my needs at the moment. Not even like on a whole other level, like a reflective level at another point. So I'm glad they can do something for you. For me, it just always comes back to what's going on up here. What's going on up here, and what's the purpose of what I'm engaged in right now. So just listening to him talk about how the movie The Matrix taught him to question what he was thinking, why he was thinking it, was fantastic, right? Like, and the Gary Vaynerchuk clip too, about the reason many people don't do what they want to do is because they're worried about other people's opinions about them. And it's like, I'm not saying that people like you and I should never pay attention to anybody else's opinion. What I'm saying is that before you give someone the power, like over your mind with respect to how they might feel about you or what they think of you, I think it's important to really think critically and consider whether that person and their thoughts are actually worth any of the heartache that you might experience over what they think, right? Like, my wife's opinion usually has more weight than a colleague at work, just because she's my life partner. She knows me like really well, even though I have a hard time admitting that. But sometimes the things she says, I need to put aside. And you and I have spoken privately about like certain things I've done where, people have said, oh, you're crazy for doing it. You can't do that. You're in no position to do that. And it's like, okay, well, thank you for letting me know what your thoughts are. And I'm just going to move forward now, and I'm going to go down the road that I think is best for me at this time. So anyway, I think it's these two guys, who knows whether they're in a position or not to not care about what anybody thinks. And I think that they do at some point or another, they do care. Right. But ultimately, everybody needs to check in with themselves and decide where you need to go and why you need to go there. So, today, what you say about something I want to do might have great impact on me. And other days, it might be, oh, Clough thinks this is a good idea, but I'm not going to do that because I don't think that's best for me. This is what I'm going to do. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you take you counsel and you hear what people have to say, and then you got to come back to your head and you got to realize that whatever it is you're going to pursue, whatever, like if you want to look at it in an educational context, you can ask people in your division about a particular activity you want to engage in or a concept you want to address and how you want to do it. And you might get 4 different answers on which way to go and why to go that way. But at the end of that, you need to decide, well, whether any of the things they said mean anything to you and the impact. Like if you go down a different road, somebody might feel offended. Well, how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to feel about that? And I think there are some people who spend all their time worrying about those things. And there are some people who spend their time not listening to anybody about anything, which is dangerous as well. And then there's that nice path down the middle where there's consideration, there's awareness, but at the end of the day, you have to do what you feel you need to do, even if it means there's going to be difficulty or there's going to be some type of harm. And I don't mean harm in like people getting hurt. I mean harm in that you fail and then you regroup, because sometimes you need to fail before you can succeed. Actually, that happens a lot, but sometimes you can't hear it. You can't see it around you. You just need to do it. You need to fall flat on your rear end and then be like, oh, because that falling on your rear end, that's going to allow you to pivot in a different direction because you can actually feel it. It's tangible. It means something to you. And I know that's hard because a lot of us want to teach our kids, for example, how to operate a certain way, because we know that if they operate in another way, it's going to lead to a lot of harm. It's going to lead to a lot of failure and hurt feelings and loss of confidence. But sometimes people need to live it in order to actually feel it and pivot. It's hard because if you tell me right now, if you say to me, oh, you know what, it's not worth you being a doctor because of reason number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I hear you, but I might be like, yeah, I hear it, but I'm doing it anyway. And then when I hit barrier number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can feel that pain, I can feel that hit, and then I can pivot. And at some point I might decide, I'm done pivoting. This isn't for me. I'm going to go down a different road. Or, oh, this is what it feels like. Well, then I better push on and get to the next thing and learn from what's happening to me here. So it's all that. It's that mindset, that awareness, checking in with yourself and thinking, and to really go deep. Like, what is important to you? What is important to me? And then go from there. And I think a lot of people from my experience don't want to go there. They don't want to go deep. They're really concerned about what the people around them are going to say and feel. But the people around you, in my opinion, are always going to have something to say, positive and negative. You're never going to find yourself in a position where people are just going to be patting you on the back and mean it authentically. It's just not going to happen, right? There's always going to be people who question what you're doing, and not always in a negative way, but in a critical thinking type way. What's your take on that?
A bunch of different things. If I go back to the conversation that I had with Karen around her being a part of this play, you know, one of the things that we kind of landed on was the intention. And her intention, again, part of her intention was to remind herself about the challenge of being involved in the creation of art from an artist's perspective, not from a teacher's perspective. Because she had said, you know, I'm gonna be reminded of, you know, the stuff that my students go through in trying to put together this extracurricular show that we're doing, and they're a student all day long. So that she understood that from a technical level because she is directing them in this after-school play. But she wanted to get inside that storm a little bit, which is why she thought, you know what, I'm gonna go and try and get a part in a play. And oh my gosh, I got a part in a play. Now I'm gonna try and make that work with my life. And you know, our life is just as complex as any of our students' lives. So when she as she went through the process of the play, then she started to assume that sort of space that an actor exists in. And one of the conversations we had was whether or not people liked her performance. And all I said, let's go back to your intention here. Your intention is different than where you are right now. I said, that could be important, that, you know, you want people to say nice things about what you're creating. But remember, your intention here was slightly different than the high fives and the good reviews. That could come, it may happen, but maybe hold firm to what your intention was to be in the center of the experience. That's my first sort of thought. So it's funny how the conversations are existing, and the things you're bringing to me are on point with conversations that are happening in my life. The other thing that comes to mind in this, and it's, well, two things, that falling on your butt for a moment is not only, I think, what happens in that moment when you fall. And sometimes when I found myself in student successful conversations about whether or not a teen is able to take some of the instruction, take some of the lessons, take some of the mentorship that we've tried to work with them as far as learning skills, you know, life skills, curriculum, and whether or not they're able to generalize it, we sometimes find ourselves in a conversation where we're looking at whether or not the child is ready for what will it take for them to be ready to help themselves. So the team is always ready to jump in and help, but what would it take for the kid to be ready? And sometimes I remember I was in a conversation with an administrator one time, and they said, you know, that you have to recognize yourself that you're kind of at the bottom of your own barrel before you can be open enough to take on some of the supports around you. And when we were talking about the students in general, our hope always was that when the student gathered that awareness that they were ready to change, that the resources would still be there for them, so that they're prepared to change while they're still under the protection, let's say, of the high school guidance counselor, student success team, administrator, all these individuals that are just chomping to help out. Because sometimes that bottom of the barrel can happen away from protective elements. But I think that bottom of the barrel, regardless of where it happens, is the moment where either by necessity or just by clarity, you're reaching for a new resource. And I think that then becomes the starting point of what Bilia was talking about, the suffering, that in order to change, I mean, the truth of it is that if I decide to drive to London in my car this morning and I have a bunch of stuff scheduled, there's only a single path. If I decide to drive 3.5 hours west to London, Ontario, my only path back is 3.5 hours. And there's no cleaner way. There's no better way. I might be able to tweak it slightly, but the cost of going in one direction for X amount of time, sometimes the suffering is 180 and reversing. Life choices can be like that too. When I broke my shoulder, I didn't realize my age until I started to unwind first my concept of self. And in doing that, I realized this is like in my brain, I could say in my brain, I'm not 45 years old. But my shoulder reminded me that it's a 45-year-old shoulder. So my brain is my matrix saying, you'll be good. You'll be all right. My shoulder is the thing that in the middle of the night, when I decide to put my arms above my head to sleep, see, that it says, dude, I'm 45 years old. So the suffering then becomes, how do you harmonize whatever that concept that's happening here, whatever the matrix that's happening in your brain, with the reality of the evidence that's being presented to you? And if you can still find a way to hang on to that dream state or that goal, then the suffering begins. Because really, if I want to sleep and if I want to be semi-pain free, to have my hands above my head while I sleep, or even, in a group session to be able to lift my arm, yes, volunteer and answer, I have to suffer more. I accept that I'm going to have to suffer more, which would be my stretches, my yoga, the other things, that the physical therapies to get that shoulder rolling. So, and sorry, and where I end on this is that I don't know if there's a really great, again, like using the language about talking about mindfulness and the experience of mindfulness and trying to make it a lesson in the classroom. When we talk about the suffering in the classroom, whether or not you want to improve as a teacher, you want to improve as a learner, you want to improve as a leader, I don't know if we give a lot of time to talk about the suffering. One last bit, at the one conversation that sparks this up so clearly to me is that I know for me, I'm prepared to transfer and move within my school board in order to stay on track with what's important to me in teaching. I don't know if I haven't found as many people like me. They want to have their matrix in the school that they're in. My reality is that I'm prepared to go start up again in another school in order to stay on track with the big picture things that I have interest in. I'm willing to suffer, and that might mean transferring to another school.
The word suffering, I think, is tough to swallow because it's a harsh word, but it's true. I mean, to get to any valuable product, there has to be consequences, right? Like your shoulder example is a great example. If you want to be able, your mind is telling you to do certain things, that you can do certain things. And the reality is that you're going to feel pain, physical pain because of that. Then you either decide to continue or you decide not to continue. And that's where I think the power of people like the perspective of David Goggins and Tom Bilyeu and Mel Robbins, I think their perspective and their discoveries along the way in their journeys and their suffering, though their tidbits can help, because people who decide, yeah, I'm going for it, I'm doing this, and I know that there's going to be a consequence, which is, we're calling it suffering. There's going to be some kind of pain. There's going to be some kind of adjustment. You have to decide, is it worth my time or is it not worth my time? Your example about wanting or knowing that you're going to have to transfer within your school board in order to meet your professional needs and your professional aspirations, what comes with that. You know that you're going to have to get up and go to a new place physically. You're going to have to meet new people. You're going to have to put yourself out there. For me as a classroom teacher, it would mean packing up every single thing I own in my room, which I've done several times. And to be honest with you, it's never been easy. Every time I go to a new school, it's like, okay, I'm going to feel weird for the first 3 or 4 months. It's just going to be different. I'm going to kind of be on edge. I'm going to do my best to meet people and to be friendly. Not that I walk around trying to not be friendly, but if you want to make friends and if you want to get to know people, then you have to put yourself out there. You're at the mercy of the culture and the nature of your new home. There's just no way around it. It's not going to be like what you were used to at your former workplace. There's a different culture. There's a different way of operating, and it takes time to get used to that. Now, having said all that, that's always been, I've always understood those consequences, that pain and suffering, and I've always just done it anyway. Because for me, the end game is moving on in a direction that I want to move in for whatever reason. But I hear you, and I think students, young students like the ones I teach, I've been very explicit, especially in mathematics and writing so far this school year, with the thinking that there is going to be some negative consequences to your actions here. There are going to be times where you don't feel good about what you're doing. You're not going to want to do what you're doing. But I'm telling you that the end result, you're going to be so proud of that end result that I hope that you realize that in order to have gotten to the end, you had to go through the middle, and the middle involves a lot of things that will be uncomfortable, that will test you, that will push you, that will cause you to feel like you can't do it, that will cause you to want to quit. But you need to keep your eye on the prize. You need to keep your mind moving. And if you think of what you're doing, if you think of yourself as a learner, as someone who's constantly gathering new information, inputting it, and then having some kind of output, and knowing that the input output is going to be wonky a lot, then you'll be fine. But if you think of yourself as, oh, I'm good at this, and then you do it and you're not good at it, then it throws you off, and you're completely at the mercy of the people around you to try to get you back on or not. And so I've been really pushing, especially with the writing. I've been really exaggerating how I'm proud of them, but I've been making a really big deal of their finished products, their published work, and then showing them. In one hand, I'm holding one piece of paper that is being published. We're putting it on the wall, we're putting it in the hallway, or we're sharing it on the internet. And then holding in my other hand a stack of papers that represent the drafts, the generation of idea, the gathering of ideas, the conferences, and saying that without all this stuff in the one hand, you don't get to the good stuff in the other hand. It doesn't happen. You have to go through this process. And this process is going to happen over and over and over again, no matter what you do. It's very rare for people to be able to just do something perfectly the first time. And I know only one human in my life who more than 50% of the time, in my experience with that person, they've been able to do something the first or second time without any kind of process. They're just built to be able to do things really well without too much practice. Only one. I don't know anybody else. I've never witnessed it or seen it in a physical way, in an intellectual way. So I tell my kids, I'm like, you don't think that you're that one. Think that you're the 100 others that are just constantly processing, revisiting, relearning. And then at the end, you can be proud of your product, but don't forget about what happened on the way to getting there. A lot of things happen, a lot of things you may not have liked, but you had to get through it to get to where you are today.
Yeah, there's an asymmetrical balance to it, right? That idea, I like the visualization of the stack of paper versus the other stack of paper, because it's not a one for one. It isn't. But that the volume of attempts is it's proportional. I don't know what the algorithm is, but it's proportional. And the hope, I don't want to say hope, it feels too loose, but the intent, the goal is to get some wins on the other side there. And, you know, if your friend, your colleague is like batting 500, that's pretty good. That is pretty good. I think we're going all the way back to episode 1 or 2 where we started with the baseball analogy. Nice wraparound, dude. But it's funny because I find myself when I become really deeply sort of empathetic deeply empathetic. I realize that there has to be wins. There's got to be some wins there for someone to sort of tolerate those random experiences on that stack of paper. So I like what you said about that, about, you know, these single things that we are going to show. That's got to be the win that we show, for sure.
Well, and the wins along the way in an educational setting are the teachers and the friends saying, hey, good job. You did this really well. Take a look at this area here. Let's see if we can improve on this part. The wins are that during that process of failure, for me, the wins are the support around you and the guidance around you. Like I say to my kids sometimes, imagine if you had to do this on your own with nobody guiding you, nobody supporting you, and you take your work, you hand it in to somebody who wants to see an end product and like, no, this sucks, go back, do this again. Go back, do this again. But you never really get any support. You never get any instruction. And I tell them, like, it's a journey. So buckle up and get ready for the journey. It's going to be a long one. And along the way, I'm walking with you and I'm learning with you and from you. I mean, there's a lot of content that's up here for me that I deliver to them, but I gain so much from listening to the reasons why they do things, right? And trying to figure out how to help them move in a direction that will lead them to that end product being really awesome. I had one student. So right now we're writing a paragraph. We're calling it a short story, but it's really a paragraph. So it's very short. It's a Halloween. It's supposed to be like a spooky story. And the idea is the kids are they're writing their stories. Then they're reading them. We're recording them audio. And then we're putting together a Halloween podcast. And we're going to push it out to people so this week so that they can listen to it and kind of wrap their brains around our work. So we're publishing our work in a podcast format. And I had one student, when she was all done and she had gone through the process of meeting with other students, meeting with me, revisions, drafts, you know, she said, okay, I'm ready to read my work, but I don't want to read the finished product. I said, okay, what is it that you want to read? And she pulls out this paper that is just, it looks like it's been demolished. And to me, it was draft number 7 or something. But to her, she's like, this is it. This is the story I want to share. What do you like? And then she's looking at me like, so how are we going to do this? And I'm like, well, the end game for me as an educator who's evaluating you was the paper pencil paragraph. That was the focus. That was the goal. And the criteria that we talked about was to lead you to that goal. The podcast is bonus. It's extra. It's not, it's icing on the cake. It's a way of presenting our work. So if you want to read what I'm calling draft number 7 on the podcast, okay. Like, it, you know, do you care that people who hear this might think, wow, that student that read that was really rough. Like, it didn't seem to flow. I said to her, how do you feel about this? Does that mean anything to you? And she said, no, none of that's important to me. What's important to me is I want to share this on this paper, what I wrote here, this paragraph that's been demolished. This is what I want to share. And I said, okay, well, I've spoken to you about the different aspects of sharing that piece of work, and you have met the learning goal, and you have shown me that you have been able to provide and follow the criteria that we established for this goal, and you met it. So if you want to read that, that's awesome. Go for it. But I wasn't just going to say, yeah, okay, or no, we're not doing that. There was going to be a conversation, right? I want to know why. I want to know why. I want to explore that with her, and I did. And then, you know what? When it was her turn, she came up. She sat in front of the device, and she read it, and she was so proud of herself. She was so happy. And ultimately, that's what I want them to remember. I want them to remember that we did this really cool thing, made me feel good. Oh, and by the way, if they ever consider anything I've evaluated, I did really well on my Halloween paragraph because there was a goal, there was criteria. I went through the process with my classmates and I succeeded.
I love that example for 1,000 reasons, but I'll give you the one specific that just rings out truest to me. I so often find myself in that position of providing the feedback, the conversation, the reflection, the mentorship. And I didn't realize how much I crave pushback until you gave that example right there. We can get so up in our heads. Here's parallel conversations, being able to open up a course wide enough that the kids become self-directed, slightly autonomous, and they become confident in their choices. Because the parallel conversation to that is, you're still going to do what I tell you to do. And somewhere between those two extremes, I think I want students to push back every once in a while and say with confidence, this is the version that I want to hand in. I get that I could change it into something else, but I don't want to, and here's why. And I love that. And part of it is that, you know, our hope is that we want that type of self-analysis in our children, to be able to recognize that this is the thing that they've created. It was intentional. I didn't accidentally do 22, drafts and then hope to polish for the one final copy, let alone the fact if you do 22 drafts, should you be able to hand in 22 final copies? There's a whole other conversation there. But I love the fact that there was pushback. I do. Because the deflating conversation on the other side is, that's good enough, I'll just hand it in. That's not the conversation I'm talking about. I'm talking about those instances where the kid pushes back and says, this is the one. And you're looking at a stack of 20, you're like, but I think 20 is a little bit better than 12. Like, no, but you know what? There's something about 12. That was the one. I kept on drafting for you. I should have stopped at 12. So that's a good example. I love that. I love that story.
I like your point too. I like that. It's important sometimes to get the pushback and to honor the person, to find out what's going on, the why, right? And to honor them. So, and she met the goal. Like I can't, sometimes I am unfair, but in that situation, that what she was doing was fair. She's like, I gave you what it is that you needed. I gave you what it is that I agreed to participate in. But the podcast, you said we don't have to read it if we don't want to. We don't have to be part of this podcast if we don't want to. And yep. I want to, and this is what I'm bringing to the table. Fair enough. And for some kids, they looked at me and they said, Mr. C, I don't want to read it. Can you read it for me? And so in the podcast, you will hear me 2 or 3 times reading student work that I believe is amazing work. It's not my work. It's their work. But that's where they said to me, yeah, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready to read my work in this way, but I want to be part of this. So can you please read it? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. And it was great because it was really neat. I got up out of my chair and I walked to one side of the room. I came back and I sat in the student chair. I sat in front of the device, just like the kids were doing. And I read their work just like I expected them to. So I acted just like they would if they were in that chair ready to do the reading. And then I waited for my applause. We followed the process because I wanted to show them that just because they didn't want to sit in the chair and read it doesn't mean that they don't get all the benefits of that, right? So I did my best. I think I did okay. Nobody came to me with any real complaints about that whole thing, but I'll make sure when I push it out, you get your hands on it so you can, I don't know, just hit play and listen to a little bit of, there's going to be some spooky music in it. And we're trying to have some fun. I'm trying to get them to learn how to use Audacity and how to grab music off the net and how to manipulate it and to do all that stuff. So it's fun.
No, I dig it. Yeah, totally. Link me up with it. I would love to hear it. Okay. So we've hit the off ramp. We drove the 3.5 hours in one direction towards London, and now did the return trip. So I'll tell you, this week I'm going to ask people about, because there's one last thing that we didn't get to, but if anyone listens to this episode, they might pick up on it. I love that mention about the difference between resilience and anti-fragility, and I'm gonna put that to some of my colleagues about the, in their view, which is the more powerful tool to be a lifelong learner, and if they even see it as anything different, because the way that Billy put it together, I'm kind of liking both terms in a lot of ways. So yeah, I'll ask around and see what people's perspective is on that.
Awesome. I love your next steps. I just sit here and I'm like, was great talking to you. I'm
Yeah.
good to go. And you're like, hey, here's what's going to happen this week.
I have to be honest, a big part of that is it also forces me to, because of my context, I don't run into a lot of staff. So when I go through the school, then I can have these random conversations with individuals like, oh, here comes Clough again with another question. But it's that social, there's the social currency of walking through the school that sometimes when you're around people all the time, I wouldn't necessarily notice. But they're sort of like, they're people that I can survey with these questions. So I always give them a ride, see what happens.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to connecting with you the next time. Hopefully it can happen again this coming weekend. But until then, I wish you a really good week.
You as well.
And thank you. We'll be in touch. We're always kind of going back and forth. So I'll look forward to it.
For sure, man. Take care.
See ya.